And for yeah, that's all my circles came.
Okay. Before I cover color and paint today, we've had a couple of requests, and also there's one thing that I promised all of you that I would do. Remember I said when you're using strokes on a path that you can only fill them with solid colors. That is true, there are no exceptions. But I will show you how you can take a stroke and fill it with a gradient or a pattern or something other than solid color. So what I'm going to do is just start with a simple path with a pen tool. So click and drag. Or you're just going to make a nice little shape like so. And I'm going to go to view, make sure that I have the stroke visible. What's wrong? There we go, stroke. So that I can come up here and I'm going to make it fairly thick so you can see what's going on. Maybe a 10-point rule. Now, to try to change the color of this, if I bring up my color picker, and I want to notice that I had fill selected. Don't want that. Make sure that I have stroke selected, and I can fill it with whatever solid color I want. However, if I bring up my color swatches, and you'll see that I have options here for a few for gradients and patterns. That if I select a gradient, it automatically jumps to the fill, even though the fill was not selected, because you can't fill strokes with a gradient or a pattern. So this is how you get around. Make sure the path is selected. Go to Object. And what you want to do is to go to Path and select Outline Stroke. There is no keyboard equivalent for this. As soon as you do that, it now leaves you the center path, but notice that it has outlined it with a Bezier curve. Now I can come in here and I can fill it. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Sorry about that. Make that the foreground. Now I can, oh, don't do that. I guess I have both of them selected. Select just the stroke. There we go. We should be able to fill it. Oops, yeah, I want to fill it. Having a hard time here. Okay, what am I doing? I need to select. Oh, because it's a group. Okay. Object, ungroup. Now I'll take the shape away from the path, and I will fill it with the gradient. So if you're wondering how they did the squiggle and the parrot, they used the brush tool to make a brush pen, and I'll do that next, and then we'll outline that, and then it becomes no longer simply a stroke, but it becomes a shape into which you can fill patterns, gradients, whatever you want. Now, having said that, when we look, remember, see, this is my original path, and it kept that as well. And when I outlined the stroke, it treated these as a group. So that you still have the original stroke, you now have that thickness that you would assign the stroke, and it has been outlined with a path. Okay, so I'm going to select delete, and bring up brushes, and let's find something here. We'll do the same thing. Brush tool, and I'm just going to double click. Let's make this much wider, maybe 300%. Oh, okay. Let me cancel this one. Move on. Would help if I had a stroke over. Okay, so that's really thin. I do need to go back to the brush tool and thicken this a little bit. So 350%. So it's nice and thick. Okay. Similar deal. I try to go back with my palette and leave it on a stroke and try to fill it with pattern. It applies the pattern, but it doesn't. I mean, it remains black. So what I need to do with this stroke is to do the same thing with object, path, and outline stroke. And as soon as I do, it screws it all up. Hold on. Why can't I do it? I may have run into a dead end, something that I wasn't anticipating, because I've done this before, and I'm currently doing it wrong, incorrectly. Okay, now go into stroke for a minute. I blew up, I can't think. You want to take one of these custom brushes and outline them. There's a different procedure that I have to follow. And I'm going to have to come back to you on that. Sorry about that. Okay, on to the next one. You want to know how to poke holes in objects. So, you can take, for example, a rectangle. Let's fill it with a pattern. And I want to poke a hole into it. It could be any shape you want. Doesn't matter what shape. So I'll go back to my trusty star. This is the one. We'll make sure that it is filled with a color so we can see what happens. And I also need to bring the Pathfinder tool up. So Pathfinder is up. So where is it? Right here? Okay. So I need to select both shapes. The cutting shape should be in the foreground. And that's the star. That's going to actually, imagine that to be almost like a drill bit. I'm going to use that drill bit to drill through the shape. So with both of them selected, and how I selected them, you can either shift click by holding, clicking on one, holding down the shift key and selecting the other, or because they are basically grouped, I can click and drag and rubber band around both of them and they will both be selected. Now what I can do with the Pathfinder tool is subtract the top shape from the back shape, which is the second one right here. Subtract shape from shape area. So now when I click here, it removes the properties of that shape and it uses it as a cutter to cut through that other one. And now if I want to make that change permanent, because now this is a compound path, I can expand it and make it permanent. And now when I click on this and I drag it on top, you can see that you can see through it. Okay. Very effective tool. Very effective. Can be used in many, many ways. Any other tools or anything that I've covered that you want me to review?
Say you want to highlight you might put the star and stuff back.
You want to do the reverse of that?
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, but how would I'm trying to think of how I would make the shape. If I did this, if I overlap it like so, maybe you only want this shape to remain, meaning the part that overlaps. Okay, if I selected both of them now, and I selected this one, notice that it's just this part that removes. I can also do this. I can have both of these selected. Watch what happens when I select this one. That where they overlap will go away, but everything else stays. So that can be very effective too. Really, really effective. That's sort of what you're talking about. Now, obviously, it removes the properties of the star and combines it with the underlying shape. If you wish these to be separate, then perhaps what we should have done is use this tool here that I've used before in Pathfinder, which is divide. It would then cut them up into all completely different shapes, and then you can fill them with different colors or leave them unfilled if you want. And also apply different strokes to each of the shapes. Okay? Set that aside. A lot of different ways. With CS3, they have added so many features pertaining to color. It's just unbelievable. So much so that I feel today, when I'm done with this demonstration, and I'm not going to do the exercise in detail. I'm going to go over the basic principles of colors and fills and live paint and that sort of thing. There are just so many things that you can do with color with CS3 that they've added. I want to show you the Linda Wyman tapes as well. Let's cover this in class. So they have some pattern fills and some gradient fills that they do in here. That's not hard. I can show you some basic principles for that. That's not new. This is relatively new, that when you start with an outline like so, and you select it, notice that this has already been changed, or it can be changed if I select everything. That I will, in a little while, use this. It's the live paint button. I'm sort of showing you that before. We would have to convert this to live paint shapes, and then just on the fly, just click, 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 and you can fill it with whatever colors you want. If it's kind of a coloring book style illustration that you're going to do, you can fill shapes very, very quickly. For some of the basic changes that we can add, we can do this as a live paint as well. Or, you notice that Blammo is a group. To fill color, to fill strokes and to fill the shapes, it's easiest if you just simply select it first. Select the shape that you want first. And realize that each shape has at least two attributes. It has the fill and it has the stroke. And then if we look over to our palette, you'll see that we have here, we have on the top, we have the fill that is by default white, and we have the stroke that is by default black. If at any time you want to return, that if I have a fill, and let's say I'll fill it with yellow, notice that fills like so. And I want to return everything to the default colors, you just, in the lower left-hand corner here, default fill and stroke, click there. Or hit Shift D. So if I hit Shift D, it's supposed to, just D, never mind, not Shift D, just D. If I want to affect the stroke, you click on it and bring it to the foreground. And the stroke can be whatever color you want to. And then while it's selected, we can go ahead and we can change the thickness of it. Okay. We can also change the style of the stroke if we want. If we want a broken line, a dotted line, we do all sorts of things. By default, strokes that are assigned to shapes are one-point strokes. Okay. Notice that I have a red stroke. So, if you wish to also use the last color, or for a fill, or you wish to remove an attribute, you can click from here. And when you select the shape, you go ahead and click here. Notice it removes it. So now you have no attributes to it. And it looks like the star has disappeared, that it's gone forever. But it's not. It is in fact there. So remember, what we're doing is we're looking at this in preview mode right now. To change that using the keystrokes, you would hit Command Y. If you forget, look under View and switch Outline, and you can see that that shape is still there. So you'd be surprised at how many artifacts that you'll leave sometimes when you turn Preview off and you look at just Outline. Now I can more easily see it, and I'll go ahead and select the default attributes, and then when I hit Command Y to change it, it's brought it back. After you have perhaps filled one, so let's say I'll change this to a red fill, and I wish to apply the same color to the other shapes. One way of doing that is to use the eyedropper tool. That I can go ahead and click from here, and when I move over this other shape, I can go ahead and I can then hold down the Option key, and it changes slightly, and now when I click, it fills with those attributes that the eyedropper has sucked up. So I can fill any of these with the same one, which is pretty nice. Okay. And if you recall from one of the first or second days, if you wanted to select all of these at once and change them, one of the things that you can do to select them all is that if I select one of these and I want to select all the others that have the same fill color or the same stroke or the same fill and stroke or whatever, just select one. And then go under the select menu and then select same. In this case, I want to select just same fill color. And notice all of them are selected now. So there may be a time in an illustration or drawing that you're making where there are just hundreds of little bitty shapes that you've created. And it would be very easy to overlook selecting one or another, but they all have the same color, some of the same attributes. This would be an easy way to select them all and then come back and say, now I'm ready to change them all. And boom, now they're all changed very, very quickly. Okay? So this is one way of changing color, and we have other ways too. Over here, we have our color guide, or color palette, I should say. And you'll notice it's similar to what we have over here. We have the same, we have the fill, and we have the stroke. By default, the colors that we're using here are CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. I recommend sticking to one color system, but if you wish to change the color system, for example, if you're designing for the web, you wouldn't want CMYK. That does you no good. Because the viewer is only seeing your image on a CRT or a flat panel. The color system that's being used there is RGB. So instead, you'd probably want to switch from here, it's this little menu here, and switch from CMYK to RGB. Or, more importantly, maybe web-safe colors. Because there are only 260, of all the colors available in the rainbow and beyond, there are only 216 colors common to both PC and the Macintosh platform. Why that is, I don't know. It's a fact. So I can switch to RGB, and now I can select, and if I have the color callouts, I can go ahead now and I can start to adjust by numbers or the sliders, or I can use the little color spectrum down below to change the colors. Yes?
Could you just move that palette? It's half on the wall and half on the screen right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. There we go. You got to let me know. And you did. Now that I have a new color that I wish to add to my my palette, Because another way of applying color would be to select our little color palette here. And these swatches are the default swatches that are available. But if I wish to add a new swatch, and I want to add this lavender or purple color, with this color selected as my fill color, I come down here, and this little button right here, it says New Swatch. If I click here, there's a couple of ways we can do this. If I click here, notice that it takes the CMYK attributes and it can name it that, which is really a nice feature. It's something that they took from Adobe Macromedia Freehand. So if you need to know the percentages in the future of that color when you're working in CMYK, you have them right at your fingertips. If you wish, you could also rename them. So if it's, you know, my favorite color, you know, and that's a way that you prefer to identify it. And sometimes in illustrations, it's easier to say that this, if you're doing, illustrating a flower or something, stem, leaf, veins, you know, then maybe the colors will make more sense to you. And then just click, and notice it adds it to our palette. That's one way of doing it. Another way, let's select another yellow here, or maybe another interesting color, maybe more muted. No, I'll just take that. I can also take from here and just drag it into the palette and release, and it will add it. Okay. Everybody see how I did that? You just select the color, fill color, click, and drag it. Now I have 2 copies of it. And I don't really need 2 copies, so I can select one, and if you wish to remove any of these, you click on it and select it, and then click on the delete button. You really want to remove this swatch? Yes, I do. Now, we are not limited to these swatches. Obviously, you can create your own swatches one at a time, or we can create them in groups. So the way of adding colors is that we can work with the little color spectrum. We can use the color sliders in CMYK or RGB. We have our swatches, and typically, if you have experience painting or working with color, you'll want to work with a restricted palette. You know, you'll use the same colors over and over again. So you want to create your own palette. Well, one of the things that we can do here is we have libraries of colors. And there are libraries that are available now online that are pretty incredible. So now what I can do is I can come here and we can open Swatch Library. And you'll notice that they have made available for us 10, I don't know how many color palettes, just an incredible number. Let's go to art history, for example, and let's select Impressionism. And there we go. We have some Impressionist palettes for us. And you'll notice that most of the color palettes are pretty restrictive. Really, I don't know if anybody had 2D design class or any painting classes. Typically, let me know if your instructors have told you differently, but if you restrict yourself to maybe 4 colors, that's really all you need. Okay? You don't need lots and lots of colors. Just 4 colors and you can do a lot with that. You can mix those colors to create additional ones, but really, if you minimize your palette, I think you'll be better off. And so here, if you're really stuck for colors to choose from, you have a whole range of palettes to bring up. Okay? So here's our Impressionism palette. Another way to grab a palette is and create a palette, which is really pretty cool. This I was blown away when I do this. Is that I'm going to import an image, and this could be a really intricate photograph if you want, and maybe you want, so let's take an intricate photograph. I'm going to go ahead and place an image from my Photoshop library. Just to show you what we can do. Actually, you know what? I need to open it in Photoshop first to change it to 72 pixels per inch. Just to be on the safe side. But anyway, if you want, you know, there's an image that you have found, and you're really intrigued by the color that they've used in that photograph or in a painting. In a nanosecond, we can grab all of those colors. It is really, really, really cool. So, we go to File, Open, in Photoshop, and I need to go to, I'm going to use this time the lake. This is a 16-bit image, so I have to go to image mode and change it to 8-bit for one. And let's go to image size, and I want to make sure it is 72, so that's good. So I want to find all the colors in this. Okay. And there may be more than really I want, but I want to be able to, rather than hunt and peck, I want to be able to find them pretty easily. So I'm going to save this on my desktop. And I'm going to name it Lake. But I want 16-bit. Scroll down the desktop and save it. And just leave it compressed. And hide it. Let's go back to Illustrator and let's place it in Illustrator place. Let's go back to my desktop. And let's find Lake, and let's place it in there. Okay. And because I have the horizontal image, I want a horizontal format, I go to File, Document Setup, and I switch from vertical or portrait to landscape. So I have it in there. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I want to find all the colors in here. So what I'm going to do is I have a choice, and this is really tough. If you want to limit it to 16 colors, let's do that so we don't go nuts with it all. So what I want to do is I'm going to use Live Trace to trace all the shapes in here and to reduce this to just 16 colors. And when I have those 16 colors, I want to create a palette from those. So I'm going to go ahead and select 16 colors. It's fitting all the paths. So it looks a little bit more like a posterized thing. Now I'm going to go ahead and expand it so I have all the shapes. Okay, lots of little bitty shapes. Now I want to add all of these colors and create a new palette here. So how do I do that? I select all of these, like so. I come over here and I select, I want a new color group. And I want the new color group, I'll call it Lake Colors. From selected artwork. Okay? And there you have it. There are all the colors. Pretty amazing, huh? And then they are in their own little group now. Very nice. Now, there's more things that we can do with these. In addition to this, and that's where I'd like to show you the videos in a little while. From here, we can work with this color group. We can work from other color groups that we already have here. Maybe we want just complementary colors, or we want split complements. And within the colors that we have selected, if you select one of these colors, or color groups, now from within that we can select other colors within that that are related by split complement or by analogous colors or whatever we want. So it helps us to organize our colors tremendously. This gets really, really complicated. Then in addition to that, we have another feature down here which is really cool. That we can edit colors from here using something with it's like Live Color. And I can select all of this that I have selected here. And I'll collect this. And now, you'll notice, with live color, I can now switch from other color groups. I can use complementary color schemes. I can use analogous color schemes. And before you know it, I've got a whole new illustration with a whole different color scheme on the fly. Pretty wild, huh?
How did you do that?
We'll see this in detail. I feel comfortable using it, but not explaining it in detail. And I think the guy does a pretty good job in the video that we'll watch. But it's basically selecting the artwork that you have. With the color guide here, you select this tool right here, which is Edit and Apply Colors, and it's called Live Colors. And when you click this, you have a little color wheel. And now these are all the colors that exist in here. And we can select from one of these or all of these, and we can move about the color wheel. And now I have the yellow-violet complementary color scheme. We can take one of these colors and you can move it in and lighten it, or we can darken it and you can change it all on the font. It even gets more powerful. Then we can take, if I want to swap some of these colors in here, we can assign colors as well. Right now they've all been assigned, but I can reassign these colors. And very quickly have multiple versions of one image. This was unheard of before this. And this is new to CS3. It just blew me away when I saw this. It's especially useful for fine artists as well as commercial artists. The application that's used in the textbook is that you have a label, or perhaps you've designed a package, and you'll notice that oftentimes in packages they'll have, for example, gum, you'll have, or juices or something. You'll have, they all look the same, but then you'll have different flavors. So for the juices or the gum, you'll have lemon and cherry and all those. And they'll have the same design, but then they'll have related color schemes that they look similar to one another, but they'll relate more to the flavor. Well, they also have fruit colors as one of the color systems that you can use as well. Well, you can come in and you can establish one color system, and then from that you can go in and you can develop all of your others based on that one, just as I'm doing here. You can start to swap and switch around colors. It's really phenomenal. Right. And you can disengage these, so maybe I want to take just one of these and I want to move this color over, and it just changed that color, not the rest. So it just is amazing, really, really amazing. So now I have a totally different illustration, from that original photograph that I started with. And I have a whole color palette that I've saved, it's just phenomenal. Okay. So that's live color. These are our color guides. In addition to that, palettes. If you really are stuck on, color systems, we can go in here. That's the Impressionist one. Let me go back to palettes again, or swatches, I should say. And where they are found is right here in this little button. Can everybody see that? Maybe I should tear it off. It's right here. Okay. And it's Open Swatch Library, and there are tons of them. Foods, there you go, beverages. And within each of these, there are different color schemes. Fruit, ice cream, sweets, vegetables. Gradients for foliage, fruits, vegetables, neutrals, pastel. It goes on and on and on. It makes your head spin. There are so many. So that's something that you'll want to experiment with. This is a designer's dream to have something like this. It's really neat. Okay, so we have our swatches, we have our sliders, we have, in addition to that, we have our color guide, along with additional palettes that are available for us. And we have live color that we can paint with. Lots and lots of ways of changing color. Something else that I want to show you. We'll focus on gradients another day, but you can, let me just cover it briefly. Let's go ahead and let's make a shape and fill it with a gradient. Okay, so we have it filled with this yellow to orange gradient. And I want to know what colors are in the gradient. I want to be able to create my own gradient. Well, we can do that pretty easily. And this happens to be a radial gradient, and there are only two types of gradients. There's radial gradients and linear gradients. To find out what this gradient looks like, we go to the window and we'll select the gradient window right here. And that pops up here. I'm going to pull it out here. And I probably want it next to my color guide here. And you'll notice that we have in this gradient, we have a yellow at this end of the spectrum, and we have an orange at this end. If I want to reverse the order of these, I just slide the bottom like so, and now they're changed. If I wish to add a color to the gradient, I can add it up to, I think, 64 colors. All you have to do is at the bottom is click where you want to add the color. And what it does is it automatically mixes those two colors in those proportions wherever you have clicked. Now you will not see a difference, but with this tab selected, I can now click another color from here and I've added another color. And we can also arrange the colors in whatever proportions you want. Do you want them evenly distributed, or do you want it predominantly yellow? So you can change the distribution of the colors from here as well. If I select from here and show options, I can also switch from radial to linear. And now, to change the direction of that gradient, I believe I've shown you this before. Once the gradient has been applied to the fill, you click and drag to determine the direction and the placement of the gradient. If I just want the direction to start from here and end here, I do so. And you'll notice that it's predominantly the yellow at one end, the orange at the other, and a little bit of the green in the middle. So it depends on where you click and how far you click. See, by clicking and dragging too far, you don't see any of the gradient at all in the shape. But if I click and I drag from point A to point B here, it is pretty evenly distributed. Similarly, when we select a radial gradient, it's given us the default settings that we've established with the color distribution here. And the top little diamonds also determine the distribution between these two colors. But with the circle, or the radial gradient, when I select the gradient tool, wherever I click determines the center of the radius of that gradient. And wherever I drag and wherever I release is the end of the gradient. So since the gradient ends at orange, it goes from that orange and it will go off infinitely. We can also fill shapes with patterns. There are some established patterns, and we can create our own patterns. Patterns can get pretty complicated. To create your own pattern is really not, I mean, initially is not that difficult. What if I wanted to fill my star with a star pattern? Okay, so what I can do is deselect, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to create a couple of little stars here, and I'm going to fill them with different colors, and maybe change the size. Everybody remember how I'm copying these? No? Yes? Okay. Now what you have to do is we can select these, but really what you want to do is work off a square. So the pattern that I create from this may not be the one that I really designed, but it will be the pattern nonetheless. So I select all of these that I want to be in the pattern, but it's going to take from a square format. And I take these and I simply drag them into my palette, my swatch palette. And you'll notice it's turned it into a pattern right here. Now when I select this shape and I select my star, it fills it with this star. And some patterns can be really, really intricate. But you have, if you're a fabric designer, that would be really, really useful. Because you have to know, if you've ever worked with wallpaper, and you have the start pattern and the end pattern, and how they have to match up, the sides and stuff, you have to deal with the same issues here. If you want patterns to look, overall like one big image, but in fact it's just repeated shapes over and over and over. Okay. So we have solid fills and solid strokes. We have color fills, and we have gradient fills, and we have pattern fills that we can customize. A variety of ways to customize colors and to change color patterns and color schemes. It just is mind-boggling. They have not made such an upgrade in Illustrator in a long time. This is just phenomenal. And then in addition to that, we have live paint. Okay? And this works well in some situations. So what we can do is I'm going to go back to what I've done here, and we'll start with the Blamo. And what it actually ends up with is we have this illustration here. And if this were part of an animated piece that you were going to do, or part of a comic book series, and you had, you're painting the same thing over and over and over again. And you don't want to just simply click on the shapes. You just want to move over the shapes and fill the colors that you need. And the live paint is the way to go. And what we can do, I'm going to go ahead and revert this to the original. Right now, these are just all basic shapes. And if I select them, I can go to Object, and I can go to Live Paint, and I can say Make. Okay. Now, for some illustrations, and I believe the book used to discuss this, it may talk about it again, especially when you're converting a photograph to vector graphics, that there's going to be gap issues. It's not going to know where to divide certain shapes. And you can control those gap options from here. But I can go ahead and I can turn all of these into live paint objects. What does that mean? Now I can come over here to my live paint bucket, and when I roll over these, it recognizes each of these as separate shapes. So now I can come over here to my color, and I can move, and I can start to just move on top of them and click and fill. And I can select another color from my box, and I can fill. Or I can select the stroke, and I can select another color, and we can move over the edge. Oops, not so. Hold on. Let's just fill in the colors. Maybe I have to. No, I'll do it. Let's go back to the green. Just fill. Oh. No. Now. Okay, so it can go very quickly. And that's really what's going on here. So we have our shape, over here, so we can go ahead, it says click to make live paint group. So I'm going to go ahead and click. Now it is a live paint group. Now I can go ahead and I can come in, and if I have my color swatches here, maybe I want to pick from these swatches from here. I can pick and I can move over. You can just start to fill. and very rapid. You know, you can fill the whole project there. But it works for this kind of more of a comic book style illustration better than any other. And it gives you that option when you use Live Trace. Do you want to take this and turn it into a live paint when you're done? So you have that option. But as you can see from many photographs, especially this one where I just used 16 colors, you can get lots of little bitty shapes, and that's kind of hard to use live paint because I find it easier to select one of the colors and then you go up to Object, Select, and it would be from, you know, all of the same color, and then change those, you know, change it that way. There's another nice feature to Live Paint as well, and it works nicely in some situations, and some situations it doesn't. So I'm going to show you the situation where it does work nice. And it's the one the book tells you. It looks like the MasterCard or the Visa circles. I don't know if you've done that yet. Let's pick 2 circles. Okay. And I'll make a copy of the circles. I'm going to fill one with red. I'm going to fill the other one with yellow. And now what I want to do is I'm going to select these in Live Paint. So Object, Live Paint, Make. Okay? Now what I can do is select the Live Paint. When I move over the middle one, notice that it treats it as a separate color, where they overlap. Okay, so now what I can do is I can select orange, and I'll go over the area where it's overlapped, and it will fill that. Even though these are separate shapes, it recognizes the overlap as being something different. Now watch what happens. Now when I select one of these shapes, I have to use the group selection tool. And I move it. Notice that the overlap color goes with it, so you don't have to redo it. So it is live, and it does work in some situations. In situations where there's a little bit of flexibility. Okay. So that's a simple overview of color, and the exercise goes into some of this in greater detail than what I've covered in the past hour or so. Oh, there is one that I should show you here. With regard to paths, I'm going to jump back a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and make this a much larger path. And if we want the stroke not to be solid, but to be a broken line, okay? Bring the stroke panel up, and you'll notice with a number of these palettes that they're collapsed. And by clicking in this right-hand corner here, it'll say Show Options. Now what we can do is if I select Dash Line, you'll see that it's dashed. And we can determine the dash and gap. And in one of the exercises in the future, it will control that so that you have, you know, a very specific kind of dot dash kind of look to it. In addition to that, it might be worthwhile, since I'm looking at strokes briefly, is to show you that strokes, let me just make a straight line here. A broken angle. I don't want this to be dash. Okay. Notice how the end of the line is flipped. If I want, I can control this from here. What if I want the ends to be rounded? What if I want where there's an abrupt change in angle, that it too is rounded? I can control that from here. You can also control the gap. This determines that the gap, or the butt gap, is at right where the anchor point is. If I want it to extend a little bit beyond the anchor point, I can click here. Now, you'll notice that maybe I want, well, this is a abrupt angle, I want it to be a really crisp edge. I don't want it to be clipped off the way it is. See how it's cut off? If you want it to come to a nice sharp point, you have to change the miter limit. And by default, it's set to 4. What that 4 means, I don't know. To change it, you can simply move up, and as you move up, you'll notice that now it accepts that angle, and it will change it to